You already know the Ice Age, or at least you think you do. A grumpy mammoth, a goofy sloth, a sarcastic saber-toothed cat, and one tiny human baby. It's a wonderful movie. But here's the thing it never tells you. When you imagine a real Ice Age human, you probably picture this. Cold, helpless, barely hanging on. That picture is almost completely wrong. Because these humans built their homes out of the dead. They mapped their world, and in the deepest freeze on Earth, they made music. So today we separate the movie from the truth. We'll meet the real giants and the real, astonishing humans. And by the end, you'll understand something strange. The Ice Age didn't break humanity. It's part of what built it. Stay with me. First, what was the Ice Age, really? Not a freezing week. An age, tens of thousands of years long. Gigantic sheets of ice, miles thick, buried much of the northern world. At its peak, the whole planet ran about 6 degrees Celsius colder than today. That doesn't sound like much. It changed everything. So much water was locked into ice that the seas dropped about 400 feet. You could walk between continents on dry land. And this only ended about 11,700 years ago. In Earth's story, that's yesterday. Our ancestors lived through all of it. But the cold wasn't the only thing trying to kill them. This was a world ruled by giants. So, let's meet the real cast. First, the star of the show. The woolly mammoth. Roughly the size of an African elephant, wrapped in thick fur with curving tusks that could reach 15 feet. And here, the movie got something right. Real mammoths were smart, social, and fiercely protective of their young. Like elephants today, they likely mourned their dead. The grumpy, loyal mammoth wasn't far off at all. Now here's a fact that genuinely breaks people's brains. A small group of mammoths survived on a remote island until about 4,000 years ago, which means mammoths were still alive after the pyramids were built. Ancient Egyptians and woolly mammoths walked the earth at the same time. Let that sink in. Next, the movie's wisecracking cat. In reality, the saber-toothed cat. And it was a nightmare. Its 2 famous fangs could grow up to 7 inches long, about the length of your whole hand. It wasn't a sprinter. It was an ambush wrestler, with forelimbs strong enough to pin animals far bigger than a human. And the dramatic movie roar? Honestly, we're not even sure it could roar like that at all. Now, the lovable sloth. The movie made him small, clumsy, harmless. Reality went the other way. The giant ground sloth was the size of an elephant, up to 4 tons, 20 feet tall on its hind legs. Claws like scythes. So the cuddly little sidekick was actually one of the largest land animals of its world. Not so cuddly after all. And that frantic little thing chasing an acorn? Sorry to ruin it, he's completely made up. A saber-toothed squirrel like that never existed. Pure cartoon invention. A great one, but invented. And the movie barely scratched the surface. The real Ice Age was packed with monsters. There was the woolly rhino, a shaggy tank that swept snow off the grass with an enormous horn. There were cave lions, even bigger than the lions alive today. There were cave bears, giants that often claimed the very caves humans wanted for shelter. And the giant deer, with antlers spanning 12 feet, wider than a car. Now imagine you're a small, soft human dropped into the middle of all of them at once. No claws, no fangs, no fur. By every measure that mattered out there, you would be the weakest thing on the plane. So how did the weakest creature in this world not just survive it, but take it over? Start with how the movie shows us. A small tribe, hunting with spears, huddled by fire, carrying a baby. And here the movie nailed the big one. Humans and these giants really did share the world. Humans really did hunt mammoths. We have the kill sites and the weapons to prove it. What it got wrong? The cozy friendships. A mammoth, a sloth, and a saber-tooth were not a road trip crew. To that cat, a human was prey. To a human, these giants were food, danger, and raw material. Nothing more. And a human baby, raised by animals out in that wild, sweet idea. It would never, ever happen. Because real Ice Age humans didn't need rescuing by friendly animals. They were tougher than that, and far, far cleverer. Survival came down to solving three brutal problems: shelter, warmth, food. Watch how they cracked each one. Problem 1, shelter. And you're probably thinking, why not just find a cave? Out on these open plains, there often weren't any. Imagine you're standing out here right now with nothing. This cold could kill you in minutes. So with no cave, what do? They looked at what the frozen world actually gave them. And everywhere, it gave them one thing: bone. So they built houses out of mammoths, not as a figure of speech. The walls were made of actual mammoth bones, stacked and locked together like a basket woven from giants. At a place in Ukraine called Mezhyrich, archaeologists found the proof perfectly preserved. It was discovered by accident in 1965 when a farmer digging out his cellar struck a giant jawbone. Below the ground lay 4 ancient huts built from 149 mammoth bones, 15 to 18,000 years old, and built in one of the coldest, harshest stretches of the entire Ice Age. So how do you actually build a house out of a mammoth? It's pure genius. First, you ring the base with heavy skulls to anchor the whole thing against the wind. Then you arch the long tusks overhead into a dome. You weave the ribs across the frame, locking it into a solid lattice, and you stretch hides over the top, sealing in the heat. The result: a round, sturdy, insulated home 20 to 30 feet across. Inside, with a fire lit, it was warm and dry. And before you ask, in that deep freeze, the bone and hide didn't rot. The cold preserved it all. One famous structure like this used the bones of more than 60 mammoths. Now you might be wondering, did they really hunt 60 giants? Probably not. They gathered bones over years, including from animals that had already died. This was patient work, which tells you this wasn't panic. This was engineering, a plan carried out over a lifetime. These weren't desperate survivors clinging to life. They were settlers putting down roots. And the most surprising part isn't how they built them, it's how long they lasted. Evidence suggests at least one of these bone homes was lived in for around 429 years. 4 centuries. That's not a campsite. That's a family home, passed down. Children grew up and grew old in a house their great-great-grandparents had raised from bone. And inside these homes, archaeologists found something nobody expected: a piece of mammoth tusk carefully engraved with what may be the oldest known map on Earth. They weren't just surviving their world, they were charting it, recording where to go and how to get home. And they found a mammoth skull painted with red dots and lines, believed to be a drum. Remember this skull. We'll come back to it. Because it means that in the deadliest cold our species ever faced, humans gathered inside and made music. Imagine you're in there, bone walls around you, a blizzard screaming past, your people close, and a slow beat playing in the firelight. Shelter solved brilliantly. But it bought them nothing if they couldn't survive going outside. Problem 2, warmth. The moment you left the fire to hunt, the cold was waiting to kill you. And here's where you might think, easy, just pile on more furs. But a loose hide, thrown over the shoulders the way movies show, wasn't going to cut it. Loose furs let the wind howl through every gap. They needed clothing that actually fit, and to get it, they needed an invention. And the thing that saved them was almost laughably small: a needle. Specifically, a needle with an eye, a tiny hole to carry a thread. To us, ordinary. Back then, this was high technology. At a site in Wyoming, archaeologists found dozens of them, around 13,000 years old, carved from the bones of small animals: hares, foxes, bobcats. Some even made from the bones of extinct American cats like ancient lions and cheetahs. They turned predators into tailoring tools. With that needle, they could stitch furs together with tight, closely spaced seams. Fitted, layered, tailored clothing. A parka, a hood, mittens, boots, built on the exact same principles the Inuit would use thousands of years later and that your winter coat uses today. Now the wind couldn't get in. Now a human could walk into the storm and live. And this is the part people miss. That clothing didn't just keep them warm. It let them expand. Tailored clothing opened up freezing lands that had been completely off limits. A sewing needle carved from bone helped our species conquer the cold half of the planet. Shelter solved. Warmth solved. But there was still one enemy left: hunger. Problem 3. Food. In a frozen world, there are no crops, no fruit. For much of the year, almost nothing grows, so they became hunters of giants. Imagine it's you, on foot, gripping a wooden spear facing an animal the size of a truck. A single mammoth was a jackpot. Meat to eat, fat to burn, bone to build, hide to wear. Nothing was wasted. And in that cold, fat wasn't unhealthy. It was survival. In freezing climates, the human body itself stores more fat and lean muscle for heat. Fat was pure, life-giving fuel. And the frozen ground became their refrigerator. They buried meat to keep it for months. They planned for winters they knew were coming, stockpiling, rationing, thinking in whole seasons. And through all of it, fire wasn't a luxury. Fire was the line between life and death. In fact, scientists at Harvard argue that fire and cooking are a big reason we have such large brains at all. Cooked food gave us far more energy to feed a hungry mind. Now imagine it's your turn to guard that flame all night, the only warmth for miles, while the dark presses in and something howls outside. Shelter, warmth, food. Against an impossible world, they cracked all three. But here's what truly sets them apart from any animal just trying to last the winter. They didn't stop at staying alive. Deep in caves, by firelight, they painted mammoths, lions, horses, and their own hands. Some of these galleries, like the famous Lascaux cave, were painted around 21,000 years ago at the height of the Ice Age. And in one Spanish cave, the walls are covered in handprints, many of them left by Ice Age women and children. And you might be asking, why bother? Survival was brutal, and they still spent precious hours making art. So why? Because they had stories, beliefs, and a very human need to leave a mark that said, we were here. They even carved the oldest known sculptures in the world. A lion-headed man. A tiny human figure. And what were they carved from? Mammoth ivory. Even their art came from the giants they lived beside. They buried their dead with ornaments in red ochre. They grieved. They remembered. And remember that painted skull drum from the start? This is where it belongs. Even in the deep freeze, there was rhythm and gathering and joy. These were not frightened animals waiting for spring. They were fully, completely human. So how did the weakest creature on the plain pull all of this off? It wasn't strength. Next to the giants, humans were weak and slow. It wasn't their bodies. No fur, no claws, no armor. Their one real weapon was the thing between their ears. They could look at a dead mammoth and see a house. Look at a sharp bone and see a needle. Look at a problem and build the answer. And they never did it alone. They survived by working together, by sharing food and risk and warmth. And research shows that's no accident. The groups that cooperated and cared for each other consistently outlasted the ones that didn't. Caring wasn't weakness, it was a survival superpower. And they taught their children, passing every hard-won skill and story to the next generation. That chain of shared knowledge is the real reason humans never had to face the world alone. And here's the twist I promised you. The cold didn't just test that mind, it sharpened it. Every deadly problem the Ice Age threw at them forced a new invention to answer it. Want, meeting wall, becoming tool. In an easy, gentle world, maybe they'd never have needed to invent so much, so fast. The hardship didn't break them. In a strange and real way, the hardship is what built them. In fact, here's a last fact that stings a little. Since the Ice Age ended, human brains and bodies have actually gotten smaller. Those ancestors were, on average, tougher than we are. So let's bring it all together. They turned the bones of giants into warm homes, lived in for centuries. They invented the needle and tailored clothing, and conquered the frozen north. They hunted giants, froze their food in the earth, and guarded fire like life itself. And they did it all with their minds, with each other, and with art and music in the dark. So think back to that movie. The cartoon was charming, but the truth is so much bigger. The real heroes weren't talking animals. They were small, soft, brilliant humans who refused to lose to the ice. And here's the last thing. You are the proof that they won. Every person alive descends from humans who stared down the ice age and refused to disappear. The stitched clothes you're wearing, the heated home you're in, the map on your wall, they're all echoes of problems your ancestors first solved in the snow and the dark. Ancient humans didn't hide from the ice age. They walked into it and made it home. The coldest world we ever faced didn't end us. It's part of what made us human. A few small, stubborn, brilliant humans. Gathered around a fire, inside a house made of giants. If this changed how you picture the Ice Age, subscribe. Every week we dig into the hidden side of being human. And be honest with me in the comments. Do you really think you could have survived the Ice Age? I want to know.